sin is the suicidal action of the human will against itself. And what he means is very simple. When you do a sin, it makes it much easier to do it again and much harder to avoid, much harder to resist. Every time you sin, every little sin, you're destroying your ability to resist that sin. Every single time. It's a suicidal action sin is the suicidal action of the human will against itself. And that doesn't go away right away. When you accept Christ, when Christ accepts you, when the objective guilt is taken away, there's still a tremendous amount of bondage to sinful habits. So you not only have a certain bondage to the law subjectively, your tendency to go back into works righteousness. There's a tendency, of course, we're still in bondage to our sin nature. And lastly, we're still in bondage to idols. If you love anything more than God, even though you believe in God, if there's anything in your life that's more important to your own significance or security than God, now we're talking about everybody here, then that is a kind of pseudo-God, it's a false God, it's a power in your life. It's a covenant master. You're kind of in a covenant with it in a way. And it will continually say, serve me or die, just like Pharaoh. See, objectively, Pharaoh is no longer the master. I mean, he said, go, and they're gone. And now Pharaoh comes back and says, I want you back. And this happens in all our lives. Let me give you an example, because I know not all of you are ministers, but some of you are or want to be. This can be true for career, children, or your ministry. If you want to be a good minister, that's fine. And if things go wrong in your ministry, you'll be sad. And if someone gets in the way of you doing a good job in your ministry, you'll be mad. And if there's a threat to the future of your ministry, you'll be afraid. But if your ministry and your success in ministry is actually more important to your self-image than what God says about you, if it's functionally an idol, it's more important to you than God. If you really are getting that belief that I know I'm an important person, I know that I'm worth something, I know I have value because I'm a successful minister. I mean, it's hard to know quite, whether that's what's happened to you, but here's what happens. When someone gets in the way of your ministry, you get incredibly angry. Not just angry, but just vehemently angry. When something goes wrong with your ministry, you're not just sad, you melt down. You completely lose it. And when something threatens your ministry, you're not just afraid, you're not just worried, you are absolutely petrified. You are paralyzed with fear. Why? Those emotions just about eat you up. Those are your old covenant masters coming back, in spite of the fact you've given your life to Christ, coming back and saying, serve me or you will die. You need me. You can't live without me. And that's the point. The point is there's still slavishness in the Israelites' heart. You still have the things that you thought you were free from, and actually in one sense you are, but in another sense they come back and they rattle their sabers. He says, imagine that you were a slave in the southern United States before the Emancipation Proclamation. Imagine you're a slave. And what that means was you couldn't vote, you had no power, somebody could beat you up, somebody probably could kill you. You don't have rights. And therefore, when you were in town and some white person told you, do this or do that, and was abusive to you, you were very frightened and you did anything they said. I say, now it's 10 years later, Emancipation Proclamation's over, you've got rights, but you walk into town, a white person starts to yell at you. Even though you know with your head, hey, I have some rights here, you're still scared. You're still acting like a slave. He says that actually is the condition of every Christian. You know, but you don't know that you've been saved. You know that you should be free. If you really believed what you do believe, if you believed in your heart what you know with your head, and that is, there is no condemnation for you because you're in Christ Jesus. See? God regards you as perfect in Christ's righteousness, and then you let what people think of you. You let other people's opinion. You let success or failure in this or that endeavor just build you up or destroy you. What that means is you're still a slave in your heart, even though theoretically, technically, objectively, you're not. God's freed you from things that you still are enslaved to, and you just haven't worked it in. In other words, well, the systematic theology class gives you, it says, well, God's salvation, we're freed, past tense, from the penalty of sin. We are getting free, present tense, from the power of sin, and eventually we will be free from the very presence of sin. That's justification, sanctification, glorification. You've heard that, but this is a story. That's abstract. Here you have it. Here you have a picture of where we are. Redemption is about getting out of bondage, and it has layers. And that's the reason why the great hymns, the great songs, the things that move you, talk about that. Long my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin in nature's night. Thine eye diffused a quickening ray. I woke, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. It's true. And we do have those experiences, and yet every so often we look down and we find our heart's not free. It's not free yet. So the first thing we learn about Jesus' salvation, about the salvation is about getting out. It's about getting out of bondage, but the bondage has layers. What do we do about that? Well, let's keep going. Point 2. How do we get out of it? What does the Red Sea story account tell us about not just what we're getting out of, but how we get out? And the answer, I already mentioned this, it's crossing over by grace. When Moses hears them crying out, this is what Moses said, and boy, is this classic. Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see, my text, the deliverance of the Lord, the salvation of the Lord. Behold and see the salvation of the Lord. And of course, he says here, be still. The Lord will fight for you. And actually, he says, see the deliverance the Lord will bring you. Now, on the one hand, the principle of grace couldn't be clearer. Stand still. God's going to do your fighting. Watch. You can't do it. You can't perform it. You can't contribute to it. Stand still. You're not going to do a doggone thing about this deliverance. God's going to do the whole thing. And when he says, be still and trust the God who will fight for you, boy, does that come close to Romans 4:5 that says, and now to him who worketh not, that's being still, but trust the God who justifies the ungodly, to him his faith is credited as righteousness. Boy, that comes awfully close. Be still. See? Don't look at your works, and let receive a complete salvation done not by your works but by Christ's work. It's astonishing. Oh, somebody says, yeah. But yes, of course. All right, you're saved by grace apart from your good works. You're saved by grace apart from your moral efforts. But you got to believe, don't you? You got to believe. And you really got to believe with all your heart. Isn't that right? Because salvation is by faith. Don't do that. You know what you're doing? Hey, look, even this text tells us something about that. I love the fact that it tells us that when they walked through, it says the waters were divided and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and a wall on their left. Now, I can tell you, some of the Israelites walked through like this. Look at this. God's on our side. Eat your heart out, Egyptians. The Lord is fighting for us. And they walked through like that. I know there was a bunch of others that were walking through like this. I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Oh my gosh. And you know what? They all walked through in completely different completely different qualities of faith, they were all equally saved. They were equally saved. Why? Because you're not saved because of the quality of your faith. You're saved because of the object of your faith, the Redeemer, and the God who's fighting for you, see? And everything about this text says grace, 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 crossing over.